Hi, I'm Dr. Stephanie Jacobs, equipping us and our relationships to keep moving forward. So come and journey with me, and along the way, stick these tools in your back pocket. Around the year 2000, the field of psychology had a big light bulb moment, and the aha was this. The profession realized more research was needed to learn what makes people thrive. Prior to, the field had narrowed its vision to studying, classifying, and labeling what was wrong when we experience mental and emotional maladies. But at the turn of the 21st century, the profession applied a corrective lens and shifted its focus to learn more about what made life worth living. That focus is now its own distinct research field known as positive psychology. In this episode, we're going to look at behaviors that, when practiced, contribute to making us feel good and, well, happy. And this connects with what we explored in the previous episode. Remember, positive emotions, like happiness, help us broaden and build our thoughts, perspectives, and repertoire of responses that lead to resilience. Most of us tend to think of happiness as something we work toward, like a light at the end of a tunnel, or the outcome of accomplishing a goal, like a year end's vacation. In essence, we tend to think that happiness is something we constantly have to look for or find. But what if happiness is not just the result of delayed gratification? What if happiness is something we can actually make right now? In her book, The How of Happiness, psychology professor Sonia Lyubomirsky describes happiness as the experience of joy, contentment, or positive well being combined with the sense that life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. Interestingly, Harvard psychology professor and author Dan Gilbert separates the experience of happiness into two categories. He says happiness can either be natural or synthetic. Natural happiness is what we get when we get what we want. It's a happiness that we aim, work, or plan for, or, according to Gilbert, even stumble upon. In contrast, synthetic happiness is not what we get, but what we can actually make or synthesize when we don't get what we want. Gilbert explains that our psychological immune system works best when we feel trapped and stuck in our circumstances. In other words, we tend to find a way to be happy with or in spite of what has happened. The interesting part is this. Gilbert notes that synthetic happiness is just as real and enduring as natural happiness. Instead of our natural tendency to constantly chase happiness as something to be found, we have within us the capacity to synthesize and manufacture this commodity. We can create happiness when we choose certain behaviors and experiences. For example, in 2009, Ryan Howell and Graham Hill published research in the Journal of Positive Psychology. Explaining their study, participants found that money spent on experiences represented money better spent and brought more happiness to themselves and others than money spent on things or material possessions. Things do not bring us as much happiness as experiences do. In fact, by a whopping 40% of the time, our experience of happiness is determined by what we do and how we think. Let me break that down. Lyubomirsky says that our genetic set point determines our state of happiness about 50% of the time. In other words, because of our genes, half of our happiness level is fixed. About 10% of the time, our experience of happiness is determined by outside circumstances, like home ownership, marriage, or driving an old or new car. But 40% of the time, our experience of happiness is determined by intentional activity, namely our thoughts and actions. And this is encouraging because our behavior is much easier to change than our circumstances. So, if we can cultivate happiness and do so through experiences based upon what we think and do, we no longer have to only chase or wait for happiness as a future event. Happiness is an emotion we can create in the here and now. This is exciting. So, how do we do that? Well, hands down, three behaviors that we can do right now to shift our emotional state to a more positive, happy one are the practices of gratitude, giving, and generosity. I love to call these behaviors 3G. Neuropsychiatrist Dr. Dan Siegel reminds us that gratitude expresses thankfulness, generosity expresses kindness and open heartedness, and giving enhances our sense of meaning and purpose in life. There is a neural connection between gratitude and giving as well, and it's this: grateful people give more. When we take time to be grateful, it fosters our capacity to give to others. Shout out to episode 1. This is the broaden part. And when we give to others, like practicing altruism, it makes us feel good as well because generosity, gratitude, and giving activate our brain's reward center. This is the build part. In fact, some have called the behaviors of gratitude, generosity, and giving the happiness trifecta because these behaviors activate our brain's reward system to release the neurotransmitters dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. Dopamine produces the emotion of pleasure, serotonin helps us feel happy, and oxytocin makes us feel loved and a sense of belonging. 3G behaviors are good for us, but they're good for others as well. Now, stick with me because in episode 3, we're going to look at how an American icon used gratitude to manage mental and emotional distress and learn other 3G behaviors that we can practice to shift our emotional states to more positive, happy ones.